Welcome to the Ashley B. Cash Show. I'm Ashley Cash, and today we are talking with someone who is doing what most people only talk about. My guest is former Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ryan Walters. And he's previously a classroom teacher turned conservative reformer who took on the unions, the bureaucrats, and the broken status quo head on. He created Oklahoma's first Office of School Choice, brought parental rights back to the forefront, and proved that bold leadership actually works. The fight for education freedom doesn't stop with a title, and Ryan Walters is proof of that. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Love your work, and I appreciate being able to be on.
I'm just so excited to sit down and talk with you today and talk about the new thing that the Freedom Foundation has started, which is your Texas Freedom Alliance, where you now are, and all the great things that you are doing there to help liberate teachers from teachers' unions that are not doing the best things for our students.
I mean, it's you walk through some of the things we did. We brought universal school choice to Oklahoma. We brought back curriculum that actually focused on the Constitution, the founding documents, American exceptionalism. Put a Turning Point USA chapter in every high school. We were the first state to do that. I mean, we're able to do all of these things, merit pay for teachers, all of these things. But the number one enemy of all of these, frankly, common sense reforms were the teachers' unions. They came in nationally, spent millions of dollars against all of these efforts, were so nasty, targeted people, doxed people, all of the above. And you look at this and you go, the unions have been such a driver for the poor results we have in schools. They fight parents' rights, they fight school choice. And if you can get the unions out of the way, not only is it good for students, not only is it good for parents, it's actually good for good teachers as well. And so, yeah, we're excited to be in that work and excited about, look, there's a lot going on in Texas right now that is things to be excited about. We've just
Sure.
got to make sure people are aware of the unions will come out with all of their money, all of their resources to fight, frankly, anything, any positive reformed education, they're going to be against it.
Right. And I have a lot of people asking me, they're like, Ashley, like everybody knows the system needs change. What is stopping it from changing? And I keep telling them there are actually forces that like the system exactly where it is. And one of those is the teachers unions. And it's not the teachers, let me be clear. It's not the teachers, but it's actually the organization, the teachers union organization. And the other one, frankly, is TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards, not the board members, but the actual organization. And I just, you and I talked for a minute, and I told you about one of the bills I'm taking this year to the Texas legislature, which is a teacher whistleblower bill, so that our teachers can actually come out and speak and tell us exactly what's happening, that we have complete and total transparency, and they can do that without fear of reprisal, without fear of not just being doxxed and their information being put on social media, not just being fired or not getting a raise, but all of the other things that can happen to teachers within the classroom, which is getting the worst set of students, getting a bad classroom, getting the entire administration forcing them to be ostracized by the other teachers. Lots of things like that that people don't even think about, which is why we need a teacher's bill of rights.
And look, so much you said there is so important. The first is, in Oklahoma, we were able to uncover fraud in schools. We were able to uncover administrative bloat in schools. We were able to uncover hundreds of teachers that were sexually inappropriate with students. So we ended up getting out of the classroom, banning them for life. I always tell people, the number one group that helped us uncover those things were parents. We had great parent whistleblowers, but people would be shocked at how often we got information from other teachers because you have good teachers in the system that are going, hey, I don't like this waste of taxpayer funds. Hey, I don't like that there's a teacher doing something inappropriate down the hall, but I am scared of once I speak out on these things, I am targeted by my administration. I am targeted by the union. And so, but they were incredible allies and all the accountability measures we were able to take place. And if you don't mind for a minute, I want to walk into, you made a great point here. It is not your teacher that's going to school every day, and even most school board members that are the problems. It's these organizations
Yeah.
that are very, very bureaucrat heavy. Their leadership, the union leadership, it's not Miss Johnson teaching second grade math. This is someone that's been making six figures for decades to drive a left-wing agenda into our schools. And then they tell the teachers, hey, you have to join. We're going to give you professional development. We're going to help you keep your certification, provide liability. They sell it that way. And so a lot of teachers go, I feel like I have to. I don't see another choice.
That's
But
what
it is
teachers tell
that
me too.
top-heavy power that they yield. And what they have done in education is the teachers' unions, the school boards associations, and the administrators associations basically reached a pact a few decades ago where they said, we can fight each other. I mean, typically, right, a union fights their bosses. Well, they looked at it completely different. If we all work together, we are the power brokers, and we can leverage and fight state legislatures to give us a lot more money. We sift it all off the top. And this is why teachers, you hear about teacher frustration with things like pay and things like that. We have invested more in public education as a country, states than ever before.
Yeah.
It very rarely makes its way down to your good teachers. Why? Well, the administrators are, you have more administrators now than ever. In
Mhm.
every state in the country, we have more, listen to this, we have more non-teachers in our schools than teachers.
Right.
Think
Which
about
is
the
crazy.
absurdity of that. So you put more money in the system. We did it in Oklahoma, put more money in the system, but guess what happened? They hired more bureaucrats and less teachers. Less
Mhm.
money went to teacher pay, more money went to a new assistant superintendent or deputy to the superintendent. All these positions, as President Trump has slashed bureaucracy, they have added more bureaucracy. See, they should have less bureaucracy now
Right.
because there's less required of them, but they continue to build because that's what that's what government does, right? It
Right.
grows.
And I just want to clarify for the listeners out there, when you were saying you were speaking of the we of the teachers union, the TASB, the administration, those people siphoning the money off from the good legislation where we're trying to pay teachers, but they're siphoning the money off into the administration, back into TASB through taxpayer funded lobbying and things that they're doing. And that's what you're talking about. And I just wanted to be clear on that for just a second.
Yeah, no,
Fun.
that's these are the groups that they leverage the state legislatures to go when more money goes into education, it's got to go to us to provide these trainings. It's got to go to us first. It's got to go to administrators to be able to hire more administrative staff. And so then what ends up happening is again, you hear these things pitched as we want to raise teacher pay, we want to do this and that. But so often when you look at education budgets, there's very little of that going there. Most
Right.
of it is going to administrative bloat.
And in Texas, at least in the 23-24 school year, which is the most recent complete data that we have, 66% of the budget did not make it into a classroom to a teacher or to a student. It went into the administrative part that you're talking about. And I think that is always really surprising to parents when I tell them that. They're like, what do you mean? And it's also the reason that this year at the Texas legislature, the 89th session, when they passed HB2, which was the $8.5 billion bill, they made sure that 60% of it was directly attached to teacher pay. And I'm so proud of them for doing that. I mean, I would have liked to see 100% of it go there, but I know that there were some other things that we were also fighting for.
And I'll give them credit on this. They put a lot towards the merit pay system, which
Yes.
is I mean it's common sense. And I always, it's so funny to listen to teachers unions fight it. So paying people who do better more works in every other industry, but somehow
Right.
they want you to believe it doesn't work in education.
Uh-huh.
Of course, if you're doing a great job, we should pay you better. It
Yeah.
incentivizes folks to do a better job. But number two, here's a problem when you talk about, why don't teachers stay? Where do they go? If you're a real high performer and you're making less than your union counterpart, how long are you going to stay in it for? But again, if you're being rewarded for your good work, it helps incentivize great folks to get into the profession and stay. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
they did a great job of saying, listen, we're going to make sure this isn't going to be spent as much on administrative bloat. And we're going to say a lot of this funds needs to go towards merit pay for our best and brightest teachers.
Yeah. I was really excited about the merit-based pay because you're right. I mean, in every industry I've been in, and I was in sales for a lot of years, you make more when you do better. And that's the true beauty of the way our forefounders set up this country was for opportunity for people to take advantage of that. And it's been super frustrating to me, and I know a lot of teachers, that the way it was prior to this, if you had worked 5 years, you got paid what a 5 year teacher got paid, whether you were going above or you were doing the bare minimum. And that's just not fair in any place. right? But we need more competition in our schools. Another reason I was for the parent choice bill, because I think it will also drive competition in our schools. But the teachers being able to be paid more when they do better is huge. Now, what I'm seeing with teachers is they are getting from their teachers unions, right, who are saying this is a bad bill,
Yeah.
it's not going to work out for you. Like the teachers, and this is what we're talking about, right? The teachers union changing the messaging around that and saying this is going to hurt you. Somebody else is going to get more money than you, even though you're doing a great job. And that's not true.
No, and I mean, and again, the unions do a great job of lying and gaslighting to teachers. And again,
Yes.
they give them an email every day. And look, let's think about your average teacher. Hey, they're working hard, they're in the classroom all day, then they're grading papers and everything else, and they get an email from an association that claims to be teachers, and they say this is going to hurt you. And a lot of teachers go, well, that sounds really bad. And that's where it's
Yeah.
so I love the work you're doing of getting the messaging out on this. Of guys, no, it doesn't.
Right.
You are doing a good job. This is what this is meant to do. And frankly, I always tell people school choice is obviously amazing for kids. It's amazing for parents. It's also amazing for teachers because when
Yes.
you go to parents and you say, parent, how do you choose your school? What do you look for? Guess what? The number one thing parents say is quality of the teacher.
Right.
So the more choice and the more free market system we have in education, parents are going to say, well, if Miss, hey, I want to go to the school that Miss Johnson teaches at. She's a rock star. And so guess what schools are going to do? They are not only going to compete for kids, they compete for good teachers and they
Yes.
will pay good teachers more. It works out. It's amazing. The free market's been around for a few hundred years now.
Yeah.
It really works. It
Yeah.
really does benefit exceptionalism. You get more of it. And so I'm really glad to see Texas leaning into that.
Yes, I am too. And like one of the things I would like to see us take out though is the main teacher cap, which
Yep.
is what oftentimes forces them into administration.
Yep.
Right. And I know the merit-based pay is extending that a little bit, but I would like to see it eliminated altogether so that they don't ever have to go into administration. See, I believe in this thing called you put the right butt in the right seat for
That's
the
right.
job, right? And so a teacher has a very specific skill set and they've been trained to do this amazing thing and they get in it because they're passionate about it. And I want them to be able to stay in that part instead of having, in order for them to make more pay, they have to move into administration, right? Because their pay was capped. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it goes against our free market system altogether.
I'll be honest with you, it's a perverse incentive, right? So
Yeah.
we know inside the school setting that the number one factor of student success inside the school, outside the school, it's the parent, right? It's the parent, it's
Right.
the kid.
Yeah.
Inside the school setting, it's the quality of the teacher. So what do? We incentivize, if you're really great at what you do, we want to financially incentivize you to leave the classroom and become an administrator. As you pointed out, different skill set, right? I mean, being a manager, being an administrator, that's completely different than being a teacher. But we are literally incentivizing folks that do a great job teaching our kids to not teach our kids. It's
Uh-huh.
crazy. I couldn't agree with you more. Administration, that's a different skill set, different job. Great teachers. I want you in the classroom with our kids. We want to incentivize that.
All right, all right, all right. So, talk to me a little bit about the other things that the Teacher Freedom Alliance is going to be doing for teachers. Because I really, at the end of this, I not only want the parents and the grandparents and the business leaders to understand, but I want the teachers to understand that they have options. And that's what you're providing.
Right. So the Freedom Foundation is a tremendous group. They go out and again, they're saying, look, public sector unions, we need to get folks out of these unions, get them out of giving their money to these left-wing causes and activism. But they looked at it and said, you know what? Teachers, though, are not leaving at the same rate of other public sector unions. Why is that? Well, because the teachers' unions have done a great job of scaring teachers and saying, listen, if you leave our union, you're not going to have liability insurance. What if you get sued? You're not going to have access to professional development. You're not going to have access to a teacher community. And again, so I mean, teaching can be such an isolating profession, right?
It
You're
is.
you're there teaching all day. You're in your classroom. You want to be able to work with other people that are teaching similar subjects so that you can be the best teacher you can be. So we came in and said, look, we'll provide another option. The teachers' unions have been providing all of this left-wing activism as professional development. We're just going to provide the best professional development available, whether it's classroom discipline, how to teach reading, how to teach math, how to teach American history. We're going to bring the best resources to the forefront, make sure that they've got the best professional development possible. We're going to provide liability insurance, and we do this for free for our members. Hey, you join, we'll make sure that you're covered. We don't want you out there legally in any kind of sense that could be concerning to you. And look, we're going to provide you with a community of teachers that they're not left-wing activists. You don't have a union boss that's saying, hey, go support Kamala Harris and all these things. No, 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 no. This is a community of people that say, we want the classrooms to be great. We want to be better teachers. We want to find the best practices moving forward. And we've got thousands of teacher members nationwide and say, listen, if there's an issue in math curriculum, we set up meetings for all the math teachers to get together and discuss what's the best practice that you've seen. And so providing that community liability insurance, professional development options that are the best in the country, we've been able to give teachers an option to say you can leave your union
Yeah.
and still find these things in a much higher quality version than you would ever find in your teacher's union.
And I know Texas is among states, it doesn't have as many teachers involved with the teachers unions as in some states, but it has been growing. And how are you seeing the transition over to the Teacher Freedom Alliance?
We have seen tremendous growth. We've seen tremendous growth in Texas. We've added hundreds of teachers members from the state of Texas, and we're going to be doing quite a few of events here in Texas here over the next few months. But what we've seen is when teachers understand there's another option, and
Mhm.
when they understand that the option is more focused on academics, not pushing political activism, they're very excited because again, for them, they've never been given that option. They've never been told that, look, you don't have to join the union to have access to these things. And frankly, there's a lot of lies the unions have pushed that you'll lose your retirement if you leave the teachers union. No, you won't. You could lose your job if you leave the teachers union. No, you don't. That would be illegal. So again, we had the Janus Supreme Court decision that said you don't have to join a union to be a teacher. So you do have options that are available. We've seen tremendous growth. We've seen a lot of interest in our development around teaching American history. You've seen the left hijack this so much. They want to
Yes.
tell, teachers and students that it's an evil, racist country. Well, we go back and we provide trainings. One of ours that we've launched recently is around the Constitution. How do you get kids to understand why the Constitution was developed the way that it was? And the best way to teach it is through a deep dive into the primary sources, the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, the Constitution, the letters that were written at the time. And so that's what our professional development focuses around that so that again the teachers can walk in the classroom and give a great breakdown of Federalist 51. They can have these conversations with kids that not only teach kids American history, and again you're talking to a history teacher here, it also fosters that love for country because once you read Jefferson, once you read Benjamin Franklin, once you read George Washington, you read his farewell address, you read all of these things, you start connecting with people from history, and it's really impactful on young people's lives.
I- I'm so grateful that we are having the revival of that because I think that's a lot of the reason that we've got such a disconnect, right, in our country today. Um, but I love that we're getting back to the history. I know I've had conversations recently with Aaron Kinsey, the chairman of the State Board of Education, and they've been working on the history teaks, trying to get those ready for this next go round of reviving history. And what are you seeing anything specific on that front? I know you're a big reformer.
Look, I love everything I'm hearing out of what Texas is looking at right now because they are looking at bringing back the foundational stories, bringing back the foundational documents, and doing more of a direct dive into. Because here's the reality: is where you see this left-wing political activism that's entered the classroom. It's just theory. It's just the ideas of things. It's just a teacher sitting in front of the classroom saying, well, Jefferson was bad or America was this and that, instead of going, well, here's a letter. Here is the Federalist Papers. Let's focus the study on that, and students come to your own conclusion. Read it
Right.
for yourself. And when you do that, again, you take that left-wing activism out and you go, listen, history is a study of past events. So the best way to study past events is to dive as much as you can into the sources around those events. And so Texas is doing a great job of bringing that back. And look, I think we should be very unapologetic about this. The country will not continue to be the greatest country in the history of the world if we don't promote patriotism, if we don't talk about what made America exceptional. Well, why was the Declaration of Independence? Why is it still studied as this universal document that forever changed the course of human events? What was unique about it? What changed the direction of America that was so different from all these other countries that we saw across the world? What was unique about Western civilization? These are the tools. When you wake up today and you see like the ICE protests and you see kids calling President Trump a Nazi and Republicans Nazis. This didn't happen overnight. It
Yeah.
happened over time with left-wing activists hijacking an education system. And so we've got to get that back to where we go back to where we were 30 or 40 years ago, where students were actually understanding what made America exceptional. And it starts with that. And so I love what Texas is doing. I think it's a huge step in the right direction. I think it's going to make them a leader in the country to say, yeah, we want our students to know these things and we want them to understand American exceptionalism.
And I mean, I know from speaking with the governor and the speaker and the lieutenant governor and other leaders in our legislature that it is their intention for Texas to be a leader in education, that we recognize that we need reform in education, not just because we can't keep losing hundreds of thousands of students every year that aren't prepared, but also because Texas is leading in every other metric across the country, right? We've got the best economy, the best job growth, the best everything. But you cannot keep having that if you also aren't preparing the workforce, right? And so those things have to happen at the same time for that to continue. And for me, that's one of the big driving factors in why I'm working on reforming education, because I believe every student should have the right to graduate high school with skills, and those skills being, can they communicate? Can they read? Can they problem solve? Can they think critically? So that they can go on to have a good job and make good money for their family and be able to pursue the opportunity that the United States of America provides them. And right now, our education system is not doing that.
And to your point, you look at the economic development argument here of, okay, well, if kids don't learn to read, they don't learn math, they don't learn those basic skills, first of all, they're not going to be able to live up to their God-given talents, the
Right.
potential God gave each one of them. So first of all, obviously there's an economic impact. It's also crushing for human beings. Again,
Right.
there's a happiness that comes from finding what you're good at, finding the talents God gave you, and pursuing them to help other people. That's a tremendous thing that we've fallen short of in education. And then secondly, I love that Texas is leaning into some of those skills you talked about in character development. Listen, if we teach kids that they're victims of society and they're not responsible for their own actions, well, that turns into an adult that is not very employable and frankly isn't going to be very happy in life because again, they're just always a victim. But instead, if you go in early on with kids and go, listen, here's the deal. No matter what life has dealt you, you can do great things. You can develop your God-given potential. You can hone those skills. You can make a difference in the world around you, and you can make a difference with a family. You can really live a life of your choosing. You start developing that early on. Sorry, you
Oh,
start
yeah.
developing that early on, and all of a sudden, you've got kids that are reaching their potential, and it means a lot for their city they live in, towns, and overall as a state when you start developing that out in children early on.
Yeah. And that's the big driving force behind what I'm doing with education. And people are always like, well, why isn't it happening faster? And that gets us right back to where we started this conversation today, is because you can take the best bills in the world to the state legislature. But if you have organizations like the teachers unions and like TASB who stand up to fight that legislation, then you're not making any progress. I think it's catching whatever it is. It's in the computer system here. But it's amazing to me. I was really surprised when I was down at the state legislature knocking on doors for a bill, and all of a sudden you see all these other people there. Or you think it's all these other people, but you and I talked about how every time with every bill, it's the same people
Yep.
that keep coming back as representatives of the teachers union, as representatives of TASB, and what I'm trying to build here is a movement of parents, grandparents, teachers, and business leaders who all recognize that we need change and that we're demanding it now, so that when the teachers unions come knocking, that we have a force on the other side saying, no, we want to push through this legislation.
I think what you said there is so important, and that's why the work you're doing is so valuable, Ashley, because what we see is so many times, look, most Texans agree with you and I on this. But what happens is you've got this organized effort by these organizations, by left-wing groups, that they're there, they basically live at the Capitol. They're there every day. They're always in the ear of the legislators. They're always getting the media attention. So the media runs a story like, oh, hey, look, there's all these people that are frustrated with this legislation. You go, okay, well, that's the same 20 people that are against it every single time that y'all trot out here. But so many parents, grandparents, taxpayers around. Again, you have your family, you're busy, you got a job, you're doing all these things. We've got to make sure that our voices are being heard so that when that pressure comes from all these groups that frankly are funded with taxpayer dollars and they're
Right.
out there lobbying at the Capitol, that the legislators hear, okay, listen, but I just heard from Tommy and Susie and everybody else, that they said the exact opposite. And so, we're not buying what you're selling here, but those institutions, they're profiting off of the system as it is.
Oh
They
yeah.
don't want to see the change. If you ask anybody, I always ask people, if you could design an education system, would it look the way it does now? And they're like, no, it would look a lot different. We do it a lot differently. Okay. Well, if we all can kind of understand that with some common sense, we need to understand that these groups are profiting from the system as it is. That's why they're gatekeeping. That's why they're protecting it. And that's why we've got to fight back.
Yeah. And that's where the 66% of the budget is going, right? It's going to the administration and these groups. And just trying to uncover how it all works is the biggest cesspool I've ever seen, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
they do a great job of being very manipulative on what they're actually doing, right? They don't lead, again, when the teachers union goes out to get members, they don't go out and go, "Hey, do you know that we funnel all of this money to, political PACs or left-wing organ?" No, 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 no. They go, "Hey, we're here to provide professional development, this and that. Your school board associations, look at all the dollars that are going towards political candidates, political causes that are always on the left." Again, they do a great job of hiding this. They do a great job of making it very difficult to see the coordination that's going on behind the scenes. But I mean, it is quite a machine they've developed in education over the last few decades. And again, you're going to see them fight back. And frankly, when you see them fight back, you should know you're over the target. You're probably
yeah,
doing something that's very beneficial. You're probably moving the ball forward in a very, very good way if those groups are coordinating against you.
yeah. And what was fascinating to me is like when you look at, let's just say TASB, Texas Association of School Boards. It is an independent nonprofit organization, obviously very left-leaning, but they have basically come in and created this company that provides services to school boards. And
Right.
so we can come in and we can elect the most conservative members of our school board, but then TASB has put a superintendent in place that works with them. And because of the Gang of Eight, that superintendent is on the same level with the school board, although not a voting member. Yet that person controls all of the communication with the legal team, all of the finances, and they provide the information to the school board members. And they tell the school board members how important TASB is. In fact, TASB then trains our school board members and tells them what to think, and then provides them with information on the legislation and tells them that the legislation is bad, when in reality, it could actually be exactly what those school board members got on the school board to do, which is to transform the K through 12 education system, right?
And that's where they've done just an incredible job at controlling our education system because again, you can elect good people, but if they're being trained by TASB, if the superintendents are being, decided by TASB job search and everything else, you go, okay, well, elect a really great conservative reformer onto a local school board, all their training, everything they're being told undermines the very agenda they were elected on. And so it becomes this and tremendously uphill battle for them to go institute their reforms because they're fighting against the entire system and they're being told the opposite of what's true about legislation, about what they can do, what their powers are, what their local authority is as a school board. And again, it makes it tremendously difficult for us to move the schools in the right direction with groups like that are controlling so much of the information going into even elected board members.
And then when I was looking at TASB further, and you're just studying the hierarchy of everything in education, right? And you realize that like TASB, they're in control of the school boards. They get taxpayer dollars. So like they're the biggest horrible organization that has taxpayer funded lobbying, right? They get
Yep.
our tax dollars, the school gets it, the school pays TASB to come in and give them advice, and then TASB uses that money to fight the legislation. But then TASB also controls curriculum companies.
Yep.
They have ownership in curriculum companies. And so they're like saying, hey, use this curriculum. Well, that's because they're also getting dollars off of that. And then they have companies that provide, financial planning for teachers, and they're getting dollars off of that. And it's like this huge cyclical, just morass of horribleness.
Well, and that's where you see these groups fight so hard. And again, I was very proud of Governor Abbott for bringing Turning Point USA into the
Yes.
high schools. They're going, okay, look, no one's forcing you to have a, to be in TPUSA. We're saying, hey, if students want to create this, great, we should have it. These groups fight back so hard because, hey, that's not a curriculum they control. That's not an
Right.
organization they control. And so they fight any kind of option. You see that with curriculum too. Again, as curriculum's being developed, they fight all of it. That they want to control the agenda of what's being taught in the schools. Even when legislation's passed, they still, hey, well, we'll pick the supplier.
Right.
And we saw this all the time in Oklahoma, where we're having to fight with these textbook companies going, guys, our standards say this. You're
Right.
not going to put that in a textbook into our schools. That is not what we're here to teach. It's not what the people of Oklahoma wanted. Same way in Texas, you're going to see the School Boards Association work with vendors, work with curriculum companies to do what it is they want to do. And that's where we've got to hold the line on that. And again, that's why transparency is so important, and that's why they fight transparency.
Right.
We always, push for, hey, the curriculum should be available for parents to see. We just got out of a situation in Florida where the Florida DeSantis administration won in the Supreme Court. The unions were fighting to keep teacher syllabuses and curriculum from being seen by parents. I mean,
Right.
the absurdity of that. You go talk to a good teacher, it's like, hey, I want parents to be more involved. I want them to see what I'm
Yeah.
doing. Their union didn't even want parents to see the syllabus. But that's how far they're willing to go to hide this so they can continue their backroom deals. They can continue their agreements on what's being taught and what the curriculum is. And as you continue to see, too, so much of that curriculum is not aligned with the people of Texas and not aligned with the values of Americans.
No, definitely. It was shocking to me when I first started realizing it. And then when I have other parents come to me and be like, why can't we just change this now? And I'm like, well, because we have all these people fighting against us. And I was even more surprised, like recognizing TASB to be a left-leaning organization. And then I went down to Austin and I was like, hey, I need an organization to help me, right? A conservative one to help me. And even they are part of the problem to some extent because there are companies who have made a business out of reforming education. But if they do it too fast, they'll run themselves out of business.
Yeah, I mean, look, and that's where the whole thing, the transparency is so important
Yeah.
of who's doing what. Again, you've got all these different groups that have maybe some other agenda or something else that they're trying to do, and that's where it's so important that we continue to push. Hey, if you're aligned with parents and grandparents and taxpayers, hey, they know what they want for their kids' education. Nobody
Right.
knows better for a kid than their parent. That's where the parent organizations are so important because they can't be co-opted. Hey,
Yes.
no one's going to convince me to do something that wouldn't benefit my four kids, right? Like,
Right.
that is where my allegiance is. That's what I'm going to do as a parent. That's what parents are going to continue to fight for is say, listen, if this is helpful to kids, my kids, I'm going to support it. If not, I'm not going to support it. And that's why you see them target these parent groups. You remember how many times the Biden administration
Yes.
was targeting parents? Well, it's
Yep.
because you can't co-opt them.
Yes.
You can't, buy them off. They are going to be very, very driven to improve an education system from the best perspective there is, the perspective of a parent. And that's where we've got to continue to fight alongside our parents, grandparents, and taxpayers. If you don't have, kid in the system anymore, you though have that unique perspective as someone that understands the role of a parent and a grandparent in their kids' education. We've got to always rally together to make sure special interests aren't driving the show in education, but that parents are. And as long as we do that, I mean, that's kind of like I described it as like the golden triangle in education. Really, education boils down to this. You got a kid who's willing to learn. The kid's got to be willing to learn, right? You can't come in
Mhm.
there and do it. You got a kid willing to learn. You got an involved parent that knows what's best for their kids. And you got a teacher that is actively listening to the parent and the student and providing what support the kid needs to improve in their academic journey. If you have those three parts, that's really what an education system boils down to. And so you have all these other groups that they have their own special interests, they have their own agenda. If we keep the focus on that kind of, golden
That
triangle in the middle of
triangle.
it, that's where you get education success.
And you've had a lot of great success. You talked about, Oklahoma being the first state to have a TPUSA chapter as an option in every high school. And we now have that in Texas, thanks to the governor and the lieutenant governor. And but you also got prayer back in school, you got the Bible back in school, which we did this year in Texas as well. What are some of the other main drivers that you saw work and that or that you're pushing right now?
Yeah. We were the first state to bring parents' rights as a requirement, where, every time you want to see curriculum, every time you want to see a lesson plan, it's available to you immediately. We made teachers post that on their website and the districts post it on their websites. We also, school choice was something we felt passionate about. We had the first religious charter school in the country here. Again, if a parent wants to choose that, we want them to choose those things. And we eliminated DEI from our education system. We said we're not going to allow this anti-Americanism creep to go from higher ed, which we've seen it running rampant, into our K-12 classrooms. And then one of the other things that we did that was so important is, again, we began to push back on all of this control over who is teaching our kids. We passed anti-union measures. You're not going to automatically deduct union dues from a teacher's paycheck. If a teacher has a different background, let's say they've been in banking for 20 years and they want to come in and teach a math class, we provided them alternative education models to be able to do that. Not saying you got to go back to a teacher college for 2 years and come back to us. We want people who are knowledgeable about their subject matter and are passionate about helping kids to be in the classroom. And again, the unions would fight us on those things. And we said, listen, we want more good people in education. And merit pay was big for us. We were, for the first time in Oklahoma history, we had teachers making up to six figures in the classroom through our merit pay system. And again, we were able to recruit teachers from all over the country that were willing to come here with programs like that. But again, it took us fighting these establishment forces, bringing it in. We saw tremendous successes. Our two biggest districts saw some of the biggest jumps they ever had in academic proficiency rates. Those are things that happen once you take on these big fights. And again, we've seen Texas move in that direction. And as you see my organization continue to grow nationally, what we're going to continue to do is work with the best teachers, make sure that they've got what's provided for them, advocate for things that make sense in education, common sense reforms that get the power back in the hands of parents, bring the free market to education, and really unpack this union controlled system that doesn't benefit parents, teachers, or kids.
It does not. And we are so on the same page, which I love, because it's amazing. It's so hard. It's not hard to find people who believe that, right? That it should be common sense approaches, that it needs to be children first. Like one of the things I was super surprised about and that I'm working on this session is when I was looking at the State Board of Education rules and bylaws and their mission statement, and when I was looking at different school board, that it rarely ever puts student outcomes as a priority, right? It may say safety, which should be the most important thing. But then the second most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, should be the student outcomes. What can they do for themselves when they graduate, right? Do they have the skills necessary
That's
to
right.
lead a meaningful and good life? And I was surprised to find that wasn't anywhere. It talks about finances, right? And
Yep.
I'm like, that should be like down the page. I mean, that should kind of be automatic, but the fact that we're spending $18,125 per student, and that was from the 23-24 school year, and yet we're not putting student outcomes as a priority is ridiculous.
And again, we built that into our merit pay system. Hey, you saw this much growth in reading over a year, boom, you got your pay bumped. I mean, there's common sense ways of doing these type of things where you factor in to the baseline of everything. We did it on the way that we held school districts accountable. You had to have X amount of growth every year. Okay, you had to hit these proficiency numbers. If you did, you got advanced. If you didn't, we came in for corrective measures. And I know that Texas has done that with several districts down there as well. But these are things you build in that bring that accountability, that bring the focus, like you said, back to academic performance and making sure that when our kids graduate, and again, you've seen this across the country, blue states do a great job at this. How do they raise graduation percentage? They lower the requirements of graduation. They make it almost meaningless. It's like, great, you graduated 99% of your kids, but 50% of them aren't able to go get a job. Okay, well, you didn't do them any favors then. So you keep those expectations high, those requirements high, and you build into a system that incentivizes meeting those expectations, meeting those criteria. And again, my other hat was a history teacher. My other hat was a coach. You see this in coaching, right? Hey, it's put up or shut up. You win games, you get better, you improve, or coaches get fired, or you try different types of things to develop your players. All those type of things. That same mentality has to be in the classrooms as well. Hey, if a school district isn't Is it meeting their expectations? Okay, what can we do differently? We did
Yeah.
something where we took in the top 10% of reading teachers in a district. We brought them in with the lowest 10% of readers in that district and said, listen, we're going to pay you more, but we got to get these kids caught up. So how do we find the talented people, get them working with kids that have fallen behind, get them working with the teachers that are struggling to help build up our entire education system? Again, there's nothing I'm saying that is
Yeah.
groundbreaking or rocket
Yeah,
science. It's really common sense, but
it
it
is.
requires an approach that's focused on outcomes, that's focused on what are incentives that actually reach those outcomes. And when you do that, again, your unions will fight you, your school board associations will fight you, but most people will just view that as, well, that's just common sense. So,
Mhm.
as long as we can mobilize people behind those type of common sense reforms, you will see an education system improve, but it will be a fight.
It's going to be a fight. And what you touched on, I think, is so important. You talked about how we've lowered expectations. Because I have parents and grandparents all the time who tell me, well, actually, I took the same classes that the kids are taking now and I turned out fine. And it's so hard for me to try to explain to them that the expectations have been lowered. The curriculum has been lowered. It's been so watered down is the best way that I can explain it. That the skills that kids graduate with today, while they might have been forced to take chemistry, biology, and physics, which very few of them need, they have about the education that we graduated high school with I mean junior high with in sixth grade, right? As far as their ability to problem solve, their ability to think critically, their ability to read, which is just crazy to me. And so the common sense approach makes so much sense, and yet still people fight it.
Well, and I'll give this warning beforehand. Don't do this if you don't want to be mad. But one of the things I like to do is I like to look back at textbooks from the 80s, 70s,
Oh,
60s, and you look at them compared to today, and you're going, this is a whole other. This almost looks like a college level text compared to what we're doing today. But it's a great way of honing in on. We have such lowered expectations that. Again, I remember when I first got into teaching of, hey, we're going to do a deep dive of every Federalist paper. The kids are going to have to understand it. The kids are going to have to debate it. I mean, I had people coming to me going, well, they're not going to be able to understand that. I go, well, they should be. I mean, they're in high school. They should be able to read through these
yeah,
documents. They should be able to have the thinking skills to develop that out and understand it and then dive into the context and everything else. But we've so watered things down. And again, you hear this excuse from leftists all the time of, yeah, well, I mean, the Constitution, the kids won't really understand that. Oh, yes, they will. I think that's also been very intentional of if you don't let the kids dive into it and have that understanding early on, well, you can really tell them anything you want. But once they read from Jefferson himself, once they read from Alexander Hamilton himself, hey, you can't unpack that. You can't tell them Hamilton didn't say those things, right? It's there. And
yeah.
so I think that so much of this is going back to we can't let expectations be lowered because it lowers academic performance, but it also opens the door up to all these, you see, I'll talk about that New York mayor, you see how the kids and young people that are so excited by him of, hey, he's got this new idea of Marxism. Guys, it's not a new idea. Like if we took a history class and actually read about Marxism, guys, this has been tried so many times, failed so many times. But again, if you don't give kids that history, that context, you don't give them those, they don't develop those skills over time of how to understand what they read, digging into these sources, they're very susceptible to whatever kind of is pushed on them in an indoctrination type environment.
Well, and I think a lot of the viewers out there, the parents, the grandparents especially, will be surprised to learn that their kids and their grandkids haven't been learning that, that
Mhm.
it's been so watered down that that's been excluded from the curriculum. I mean, I think that will be really shocking to people. It's the truth, unfortunately, and we've got to get it back, and that's what the history teachers are talking about right now in Texas, right? They're looking at the elementary school, junior high, and then moving on through the high school teaks to try to get those things back, to start introducing them on a level that is appropriate in elementary school and then a level that is appropriate in junior high, and really bringing those things back that when they're in high school, they're actually reading the actual documents.
That's right. And I mean, again, I would tell your viewers, ask your kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, so why did they separate powers in the Constitution? Why did they do that? Why is there a Bill of Rights? Why was that so important? Why was that such a part of the debate? Why is it that they set up the Senate differently than the House of, and you're going to get kind of this, again, what we used to see, third, fourth, fifth grade, there was an understanding of separation of powers, checks and balances, why rights came from God. Why was that unique? To believe rights came from God, not from government. What was so unique about that concept? Why was it so important for the founders to include that right there in the Declaration. These are things that, again, as a country, you know, decades ago, every fourth and fifth grader would have been able to just rattle that off to you. And I think it's so important that Texas is saying, listen, from the very outset, we're going to make sure that, hey, when you're in kindergarten, first grade, you're starting to get an understanding of citizenship, of American history. And again, as you build on, you get into high school, obviously, you got a much more in-depth study of that. But it's so crucial. We didn't just get here overnight. Okay. We
Yeah.
didn't just get here overnight where young people have been so confused about American exceptionalism. So many young people hate the country, believe the country's been a force for terrible throughout world history, which is just so antithetical to what actually history shows us. But again, we've got to take this head on, and they're going to fight us because, frankly, for left-wing institutions, this is exactly what they want.
Yeah,
They
they've
want
got
to
it exactly where they want it.
yeah, they want to undermine the belief in this country, the belief in the role that faith played in the country, the belief that family played in this country, the belief that these values played throughout American history. It helps them to undermine those beliefs for future political endeavors. And so they are going to fight you on it. But again, I think, one thing I tell people, guys, history's history. I mean, you don't even have to agree with all of this stuff, but that's what happened. Okay. Even if you don't agree with the founding fathers, they did those things and they wrote about them. And by the way, it always cracks me up every once in a while. You'll hear somebody, well, you don't really know really what they meant. Oh, yes, you do. They wrote prolifically. I mean, there's so much writing about what they believed and why you can know in a large degree of certainty what each of the founding fathers believed, why they believed it, their study of history themselves. They were all students of history. They studied Europe. They studied ancient Greece, ancient Rome. They looked at those things and they came to conclusions of this is why we think the American form of government should be different and unique. And again, that's how you get kind of the country back to having good, meaningful conversations about the direction of the country is by starting where you both understand all sides where American history came from and how we got to where we are today.
Yes, and it's so critically important because I think just like you said, the kids that we see out rioting today, or unfortunately you watch, I don't know if it's Colbert or which one of the night shows, and they have somebody walking the streets asking people
Yeah.
questions about our founding documents or I mean, and they can't answer any of them, right? And you're just like, what have we done?
Yeah, I saw one a couple years ago where they were asking him to name a Supreme Court justice, and somebody said Judge Judy, and of course it's funny if it wasn't so sad, right? It's like,
Yeah,
no concept of anything about American government. Pew did a study on, there were only two-thirds of Americans that could even name all three branches of government. So one-third of people didn't even know the three branches of government. I mean, so you see all of this and you go, that's where we get as a country where you'll see it with the radical left is when you can't even hardly have a conversation with them because you don't even have the unified view of our past. I mean, so again, there can be disagreements, right? We can disagree on tax policy, foreign policy, but if you don't have an understanding of the country's history, previous debates, previous discussions, why things were done in the way that they were, you can't even have meaningful disagreements on policy because what they believe is, Reagan said it is just not true. So much of what they believe just isn't the truth. And so it becomes very difficult to get most of the country on board with an agenda that, frankly, like we talked about, a lot of this is just common sense. It's nothing, unique. It's nothing way outside the norm of what would have been very much central throughout American history in the political spectrum. But because of that radicalization, it's become very difficult.
it has, and one of the things I keep pushing for, and it's down the ways a little bit, but is every child taking debate in high
Yep.
school so that they actually learn to have conversation. They learn to do research, to know both sides of the argument. Then they learn to have a conversation about it with valid points based on what they found. And hopefully that will stop people from yelling at each other when they are in disagreement.
Well, and I'm going to say this too. This is where, my organization, TFA, we partner with Turning Point USA. All of our teachers are trained to be Turning Point chapters in their schools and to continue to spread that. But Charlie Kirk was a good friend. We worked together on several initiatives. And so believe in the work Charlie was doing to say, let's have the debate. Let's have the discussion. It's okay to disagree, but let's disagree. Let's have the conversation. And frankly, some radical leftists killed him over the belief of, look, I'm going to share my faith and my belief of where America should go. And it's okay to disagree with me, but let's have the conversation. And I love so much of what Turning Point's done with that. And we need more of that in the country of, guys, I want my kids, to grow up and have beliefs, have things they believe in, and feel strongly in sharing those with others. And again, if somebody disagrees with you, that's great. That's an opportunity to share both sides, and have a
To
good,
listen.
meaningful conversation. Right. That is a great skill to have. And frankly, it's how the country can get to a place of we can disagree and be friends and go to a game together and live beside each other and have policy disagreements that don't end in something crazy happening. And again, I think it's so important for kids to understand, look, debate, meaningful debate is what this country started on. It is so much a part of how our political system has been able to overcome, all sorts of strife throughout the years, is because we could say we're going to have a meaningful debate. We're going to have an election. When the election's over, we're going to move forward. And if you don't agree with the results, you don't agree with what they're doing, well, then you're going to have another election and you can bring it back the other way. But the debate has to continue. So I agree with you completely. The more of that we have in schools, the more open discussions we have around those things in schools, the better.
Well, I love what you're doing for the teachers because I want them, I believe everybody needs to have a choice right now. The teachers, prior to the Teacher Freedom Alliance, they didn't have a choice other than the teachers union. And so I'm so grateful that you're bringing that to them, that they have options now that can help them um, be a better teacher and not and take the politics out of it. So thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about how they can find you and what you can do for them.
Well, I appreciate that, Ashley. Teacherfreedom.com. Please check us out. We're on all the social media platforms. So if you look up Teacher Freedom Alliance, we're there. Please come give us a follow. And we have teacher members, but we also love parents, taxpayers, grandparents. Join us, help support the effort by showing, hey, look, we all want to get our schools back to the basics. We want our classrooms to be great again. We want that educational experience to be one that focuses on the basics, focuses on American citizenship. And again, I believe that this is the work that needs to be done. We've got parents that have demanded it. We've got great teachers in our school system that they've been trapped by the system as well. And we want to make sure that they have the options to get out and they have the options to become better teachers without being forced into union dues to go towards left-wing activism that they don't agree with. So, I appreciate that. We're going to continue to fight with parents, with students, to make the education system better. And we've got great teachers from all over the country that are signing up saying that's absolutely what we want to do. That's why we got into the profession. We want to help young people. We want to partner with parents. And again, that's how we get our schools back on track, is partnering with those good teachers to say, yeah, actually, that's what us parents want too. We want great teachers in the classroom. And again, the left has done a tremendous job of pushing left-wing activism in the classroom, forcing teachers to join the union, things like that. It's time to provide these alternatives and these options to say, no, actually, most parents just want a good teacher in the classroom, and that's what we're going to support.
That's fabulous. So, to all the viewers out there, please make sure and go check out Teacher Freedom Alliance. If you are so inclined, please support them. But also let your teachers know that they have options and tell them about the Teacher Freedom Alliance. And let your school board members know there is also another option again versus TASB, which is Texans for Excellence in Education. They actually have the same options as TASB does. So if you are in a district where you believe in America First principles and you want the very best for your students, please check out both the Teacher Freedom Alliance and the Texans for Excellence in Education as options there. Thank you so much for being with us today, Ryan. I just can't tell you how much I've enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that we can do this again some more. And especially as things are transitioning into the legislative season and we see new bills coming up, maybe we can start breaking some of those down. So I appreciate you, and I hope you'll come back.
Ashley, I would love that. I'd be honored to come on anytime. And we'll be watching and love to come on and give any updates and weigh in on that. But I'm excited the work you're doing. I think it's so essential. I'm optimistic about what Texas is doing. And, I hope to see all these things get through and would love to come back on anytime.
Well, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be a wrap for today, but please join us again next week as we discuss more ways that we can transform the K through 12 education system. And don't forget to check out the Teacher Freedom Alliance. Have a good week, and we'll see you next time.